If you're looking for a straightforward specs comparison, here is the table on screen showing you the key differences between the various smart home networks. I'm not entirely sure why you clicked on a video to see this. An article would probably have been a better shout, but the YouTube retention graph says that you guys are here, so at least let me provide you the tiniest amount of value for the 7 seconds you'll watch this video. For the rest of you, let me give you the facts, the nuance, and the healthy dose of experience and opinion that I've collected over the multiple years I've been using smart home tech and building my own smart home system. It'll still be as straightforward as I can give it, so let's get straight into it. Let's run through your options one by one, then do some comparisons, starting with Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is ubiquitous. You almost certainly have a Wi-Fi network already, so that's a tick for wide compatibility. But that's likely a downside too. The more Wi-Fi devices, the more Wi-Fi traffic, and the more your actually important devices will struggle. Want to stream to your TV over Wi-Fi? Well, adding 50 Wi-Fi smart home devices, that might make it a little bit unreliable. While newer Wi-Fi standards do help with that, and for most people it won't be a huge deal, it's still a downside to consider. The other downside is that devices inherently have and generally require internet access. Again, while you can mitigate that, to me, having my doorbell, my light bulbs and my light switches connected directly to the internet just seems like one hell of a bad idea. I personally hate the idea that to turn my lights on, I need to send a request to someone else's server, likely in China too, at least depending on the manufacturer. That sounds like a really bad idea to me. But I understand why people buy Wi-Fi devices. It's simple, requires no extra hardware, no hubs, no dongles, it just works TM. But it just works is also kind of dangerous. In terms of hard facts, Wi-Fi can have up to 255 devices on a single network and subnet. While you definitely can set up and connect more devices than that, it isn't quite as simple, so let's stick with 255 for now. Although I should mention that a lot of ISP supplied routers, think BT or Comcast provided units, actually artificially cap that to 100 or 150. And unless you know to go into the admin settings and change the DHCP rules, you'll be capped there. Then consider that you already likely have a couple of phones and tablets and computers and TVs and things like smart speakers already connected, and you'll quickly find out that you have a lot fewer slots free for light bulbs and other smart home tech. Wi-Fi is also not a mesh network. Even if you have a mesh router, that just means that the router and satellite nodes talk to each other in a mesh network, so devices just have to be within range of the access point, often the router itself. While theoretically the range should be up to 20 meters indoors, that's often very optimistic, and without it being a mesh network itself, you have to get Wi-Fi range extenders or change to a mesh router to be able to connect those devices reliably that are on the fringes of connectivity. Wi-Fi devices also require more power to connect and often stay connected to the network, so you're less likely to find them being battery powered, and even if they are battery powered, you often need larger batteries that need changing out more frequently. Controlling Wi-Fi devices generally means using the manufacturer's app, although you can use Home Assistant to control most Wi-Fi smart devices. That doesn't give you much more privacy, but at least it is an option. Next up, Bluetooth. There are actually two forms of Bluetooth control, direct and mesh. Direct is what you kind of expect it to be. You have to be pretty damn close to the device to connect and control it, but it's also fully local control, so at least there's that. Direct means controlling each device separately, usually through their dedicated apps, and technically, if something like Home Assistant can see it, it can often control it via HA, but that's kind of a big if. Bluetooth Mesh, on the other hand, acts as a mesh network, letting BLE mesh devices talk to each other and then often find the hub. That means that range is much better, although depending on the configuration, it may require a hub to actually control that network of devices. It's also worth noting that just because it's connected to a mesh network, that doesn't mean that you have standardized the control protocols. As in, mixed manufacturer devices, even if they connect to the same mesh network, may not be able to be controlled as one group from one app, for example. One thing that's common among all the mesh networks we're covering here is that there are two types of devices. End devices, often battery-powered devices that just connect and talk to the network but don't pass on messages or act as a router or node, and routing devices. These, as the name implies, route traffic around the network, acting as repeaters. These are usually mains-powered devices that can stay awake the whole time, rather than battery-powered devices that sleep and wake intermittently. These are what actually extend the mesh network. A battery-powered temperature sensor, no matter where it connects to on the network, will not pass on messages from any other devices. It connects to its neighbors to send data, and then goes back to sleep. That's something you want to keep in mind when sort of planning where to put your smart devices. Bluetooth mesh itself isn't all that common, nor is it ubiquitous, so at least for me, this isn't a great option. It's not a proper standard compared to the other mesh networks, and basically just sits on top of regular Bluetooth, which is fine for one-off and basic devices, but isn't great for properly smart tech without a fancy system like Philips Hue, and even then that's normally swapping to ZigBee on the back end anyway, so this one isn't for me for sure. And actually, speaking of ZigBee, considering I'm now making ZigBee devices, I'm incentivized to say that it's the best. Although that itself is a bit of a catch-22, because I'm mostly making ZigBee devices because I think it's great. ZigBee is a fully separated, non-internet connected 2.4 GHz network. Being a 2.4 GHz network, it does potentially suffer from 2.4 GHz interference. Although in my 3 or so years of using ZigBee devices with plenty of other 2.4 GHz wireless tech in my house and my neighbors, I've never had any problems with interference. ZigBee has no practical device limit, and assuming you have enough router devices, i.e. mains-powered devices, think light bulbs, thermostats, smart plugs, that sort of thing, there's no practical range limit either. ZigBee is considerably lower power to run than Wi-Fi, so battery-powered devices can run from coin cells for years at a time. ZigBee, at least these days, is also very interoperable, meaning a Philips Hue bulb can be controlled by a Samsung SmartThings hub, no problem. And almost all of it can be controlled from Home Assistant too. That's what I use, and means that my heating and lighting is all controlled from a single locally hosted server and app, keeping it simple, easy to use, and private. If you're interested in setting that up for yourself, luckily I've got a full playlist on just how to do that, linked in the cards above. ZigBee is, I think, the sort of second to most common smart home network behind Wi-Fi, which is no mean feat. Considering the Connectivity Standards Alliance that makes and manages ZigBee is made up of the biggest players in the game, like Samsung, Philips, and Apple, it's no wonder that it all works pretty well together. You do need a hub for ZigBee, be that a ZigBee dongle like the one that I use, or from Philips, Samsung, or even an Amazon Echo. You need something to set up and control the network. While I highly recommend Home Assistant and a ZigBee dongle to have full local control over your smart tech, I do understand that that isn't for everyone. But at least if it's only the hub that's connected to the internet, then, well, that's only one device to be compromised, not 50 different light bulbs, switches, and plugs, right? ZigBee does have some advanced features like device binding. So a switch can be bound over the ZigBee network directly to a bulb, so that pressing a switch, or the button on that switch, wirelessly controls that bulb with no further setup or automations required, and a new presence detection feature, if you have 3 or more mains pair devices in a room, is sort of on its way to rolling out. ZigBee's big technical limitation is data rate. You get up to 250 kilobytes per second. That's not exactly much, as Wi-Fi is up to gigabytes per second, although most devices are maybe a couple hundred megabytes per second, which is still 1000x or more faster than ZigBee. That's why video doorbells are Wi-Fi, although ZigBee doorbells do exist, thanks to me. Video in the cards above for that one too. ZigBee's contemporary competitor is ZWave, a proprietary or closed standard that I think is a lot more popular in the States than it is basically anywhere else. ZWave is a pretty comparable mesh network, although the key difference, besides being a closed standard rather than an open standard like ZigBee, is that ZWave uses lower frequencies, so 868 MHz in Europe and somewhere like 912 MHz in North America, meaning that it should have less interference, especially with Wi-Fi. It isn't perfect, as the limited free frequency bands, 2.4 GHz, 868 and 912 MHz being prime examples, are always pretty crowded with all things RF, but still. ZWave also doesn't have much of a problem with device limits, and again, being a mesh network makes it pretty reliable and great for range all around your house, assuming you have enough repeaters in the network. There has actually been some fairly recent changes to ZWave, considering it has existed since the mid-2000s, which is that Silicon Labs bought out ZWave in 2019 and announced that they'd be opening the standard up just like ZigBee. In 2022, though, researchers found a whole bunch of very serious security vulnerabilities with basically all ZWave devices, including the new for 2019 devices with the 700 series ZWave chips. 800 series chips from 2021 should be fine, and to be fair, the attacker has to be within radio range to do anything. But if you have, say, a ZWave door lock or alarm, think door and window sensors, that might actually be a concern. If you're in the USA, this might still be a viable option, but at least here in the UK, you can't really get any ZWave devices. Amazon only has a single ZWave light bulb available, for example. Personally, I'd also argue that since ZWave has been, for the most part, a closed standard, you're less likely to have further development when there are no less than 2 competing open standards available. And speaking of competitor standards, Matter is the latest option made by the Connectivity Standards Alliance, the same people who manage ZigBee, to hit the market. Matter is actually a bit different to ZigBee and ZWave though, because Matter isn't a radio protocol. In simple terms, you need 2 parts to make a network like ZigBee or Matter work: a radio protocol and an application layer. That's how the devices talk to each other and what they talk about, respectively. ZigBee and ZWave are both full stack protocols, so they contain the radio protocol and the application layer. Matter is just the application layer, as in what they talk about, and needs the radio protocol under it, i.e. how to talk to each other, to work. That's why you see Matter over Thread or Matter over Wi-Fi versus just ZigBee. Matter is an attempt to unify the smart home space, as in theory a Wi-Fi Matter switch can tell a Thread Matter bulb what to do directly, meaning it can all be controlled from a single app or system. Matter is actually a bit more complicated to deal with, as Matter itself is made by the Connectivity Standards Alliance, but if you want to make a Matter over Thread device, that's another $7,500 a year to sign up to the Open Thread group, on top of the $7,500 you need to pay to CSA. Same for the Wi-Fi Alliance. Matter devices are commissioned with a QR code versus ZigBee, which just automatically detects any devices that are in pairing mode, which in my experience has been much easier than with Matter over Thread devices. Because Matter isn't a radio protocol, there's no range or device limits, as that's down to the radio protocol that Matter sits on top of. What I can tell you is that Matter is still pretty new, and the number of available devices is still very much growing. You probably can go all Matter, now if you really want to, although personally I still prefer ZigBee. It is worth talking about Thread too, as that's one of the key radio protocols that Matter uses. Thread, unlike ZigBee, is purely a radio protocol. What is said over that network is up to the application layer, be that HomeKit or Matter. Thread is actually very similar to ZigBee though. It uses the same IEEE 802.15.4 standard to talk over 2.4 GHz bands, although the big difference is that each Thread device has its own IPv6 address. So unlike ZigBee, where messages are sort of broadcast to every device and then it's up to the devices to work out who it's meant for, Thread can route traffic directly to a device using that IP address, just like if you're connected over Wi-Fi. Interestingly, there is a bit more of a limit on devices with Thread. Theoretically, you can have up to 16,000 devices, but you can only have a maximum of, I think, 64 router nodes connected, and only 32 of them can actually be active at any one time. You can have up to 511 end devices per router though, so realistically there isn't much of a real-world limit, but still. Thread is very much a mesh network, like ZigBee, so as long as you have enough router sort of nodes in range is not a problem. And since it uses the same underlying standard, performance is likely to be the same as ZigBee too. Thread devices come in two flavors, Matter or HomeKit. Matter devices are generally more accessible to any platform, including Home Assistant, but since HomeKit was first, if you just search for Thread devices, there's a good chance that you find them first. They are a lot more hit and miss to get working without an Apple HomeKit network already running. Interestingly though, a couple of phones, including Apple's recent iPhones and Google's Pixel 9s, have Thread on board, meaning they can directly interact with the network. That's pretty cool. Although you still do need a sort of network controller or hub, normally something like a HomePod, to make it all work. Personally, I've got both ZigBee and Matter over Thread devices. I prefer ZigBee due to its simpler usage experience, the wider availability of devices, and the fact that I can now make my own devices too. Although I still see Matter as likely the longer-term future standard, so having a Matter network and some devices already is kinda handy. The most important thing that I hope you take away from this video though is, for God's sake, stop using Wi-Fi smart home tech. Your light bulbs do not need to be connected to the damn internet. I mean, a cursory search of Tapo, TP-Link's Wi-Fi connected smart device brand, shows that there are plenty of internet-exposed TP-Link Wi-Fi smart devices like light strips that anyone can mess with worldwide. Please don't be that person. Please. Otherwise, I think it's pretty clear that while a lot of devices, including Philips Hue, often have Bluetooth for local control, but then use ZigBee as a backup for the wider network, Bluetooth is more of a you just want to control a single individual thing rather than a full smart home system. Wi-Fi is, well, as I've explained, terrible. Please don't use that. So you're left with ZWave, Matter, and therefore Matter over Wi-Fi and Matter over Thread, and ZigBee. If you're in the States, it looks like ZWave is still a potentially usable solution, although personally I prefer open standards, so things like ZigBee and Matter seem like a better option to me. And at least right now, I think ZigBee is still the most sort of established and available and usable whole home network. It's probably best that you pick just one because these all being mesh networks, the more nodes you have in that network, the stronger the network is, and so the better of an experience you have, whereas like me, if you end up mixing and matching, you can have potential problems, mostly just from, some things not being easily connected because you don't have enough router nodes in between, there's not enough range, that sort of thing. But Yeah, I hope that's a useful look at the various smart home networks and at least a bit of my opinion about which one you should go with. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. What smart home network are you using, or if you're using one at all, let me know in the comments down below. If you want to see more videos like this one, you can hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notification icon, and check out plenty of other videos in the end cards, including the whole smart home playlist if you're interested. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll leave some links to some of my favourite smart home tech in the description down below. Otherwise, we'll see you all in the next video.